So ESPN had a poll for best college players of all time, and Michael Jordan won, and that's stupid because Michael Jordan is clearly not the best college basketball player of all time. There's a decent argument he's not even the best North Carolina player of all time. I think Tyler Hansbrough, as well as, well, it might be just Hansbrough, but I think most Tar Heel fans would say Hansbrough is better than MJ. And could you be like, well, yeah, well, MJ more talented or whatever? Sure, but that's not the criteria. It's just who had the best performances in college, and Hansbrough was better than MJ. If we want to just take it to the state of North Carolina, I mean, Christian Laettner had a better college career than Michael Jordan did. And I don't know if this is just simply because people interpreted the tweet wrong, or they just saw the name Michael Jordan, and then because we've been programmed to believe that MJ was this mystical being of basketball at all time, that people haven't gone back and just looked up his college career a little bit. But like, the Michael Jordan that we all know was not happening on that level in college. Not to say he wasn't very good. As far as who should have won this whole thing, I mean, that's Kareem. There's no doubt. Like, Kareem, what was his record in college? I've seen it floating around. It's like 80-1 or 2 or something. He had 3 championships in 3 years. He averaged 26 and 15, and assists, steals, and blocks were not calculated at that time. He did all this while shooting 64% from the field, by the way. So his efficiency was insane. And there really was never even a question about Kareem on UCLA. Like, I'm looking at their tournament wins, and I can't find a single one that was even within like 6 points. And I'm assuming Kareem went off in every game. Okay, they had one close win against Drake in the semifinal of 1969, where they won by 3 points. In that game, Kareem had 25 and 21. So, yeah, that kind of shows you the extent of how amazing he was. And I think he even lost to Shaq in this thing. I mean, Kareem, the fact that he would lose to anyone is ridiculous. But I think it was to Shaq, which I think goes to show us, like, I don't know, do people just hear the name of a guy and then they just go off of that without really diving into stuff? I mean, I didn't vote in this thing, to be fair. I just watched it all unfold, but I just have to assume that's what it was, because if it was journalists doing this, I would imagine that they would have had Kareem in there. And yeah, I mean, I think if we're going to rank the best college basketball players ever, I think Kareem is clearly number 1. Bill Walton has a very strong case for number 2. Like, he won a couple of national titles after Kareem was out of there. And, his numbers across the board were great. And for what it's worth, the year that Bill Walton's UCLA didn't win the national title, they still got to 3rd place. That's the wording of it, so what would that technically be? They would be in the Final Four. So, yeah, I mean, those two resumes back to back, like Kareem and Walton, are both better than MJ, if you ask me. And then there's Pete Maravich, who was kind of the Wilt Chamberlain of college in a way, because he averaged 44 points a game. I mean, the game plan was he shot the ball every single time. And their actual win totals for LSU, they weren't great. And, it's kind of a weird thing that followed Pistol Pete throughout his whole career. But I think there's an argument that he was better than MJ as well in his 3 years of college. Can we appreciate that Pistol Pete shot 38 times a game? Like, if that was happening today, there would be so much media stuff about it, I said he was the Wilt Chamberlain of that time. He was kind of like the James Harden, Especially if Harden didn't have Westbrook next to him. That's kind of how Pistol Pete was in the 60s. Now, of course, MJ had his moments in college. He, of course, had that one big shot to seal a national title, and he averaged basically 20 points a game his last 2 years. So, MJ definitely had a place on this thing, but for him to win the whole thing, it is a little weird. I mean, we can even go to like Larry Bird, where I think there's an argument about where Bird would finish all time. He averaged, Bird averaged 30 and 13 and 5 in college for Indiana State. And also, just because there's nothing more that I love than beating down on MJ, he did have some decent help on those North Carolina teams. He had Sam Perkins, he had James Worthy the first year, Brad Doherty. These are guys who went on to be very good to great NBA players, you know? Now, because I'm going to do that on him, I should probably say, like, yeah, Kareem did have Lucius Allen, who would go on to be a decent NBA player, so just for the sake of consistency. So yeah, but again, I don't think it's really a conversation. If we're going to be doing best college basketball player of all time, it's got to be Kareem. I mean, besides just the stats, there's the thing that a lot of people have said where they had to outlaw dunking because he was that unstoppable. So yeah, for MJ to win, what does that say about modern sports and media and all that? I don't know. It probably says something, or people were just lazy on Twitter and decided to click on some things, which, fine. You know, nothing, no harm done, really. But it is also an interesting thing, like Kareem's career in general. Because, you know, for me personally, like I have LeBron 1, MJ 2, Kareem 3, and I feel like Kareem has become just the consensus third best player ever. And yet, sometimes I feel like he's actually the best player ever, and none of us are realizing it. I mean, his longevity is insane. He was averaging 20 a game in 1986 at 38 years old. And the amount of all-star games, the MVPs, the championships, like it's all pretty nuts. And sometimes I feel like we manage to underrate Kareem. I mean, I know it's not possible for me to really find this out, or maybe it would be, but I would like to know if he was the consensus best player ever in the mid to late 80s, you know? Or perhaps people were saying like Russell and Wilt and Jerry West or whoever. Or maybe by that point, Magic and Bird had already built up enough of a resume. Magic could also be somewhere on this college thing. The other thing that's interesting to note is how early Bird and Magic's careers were cut short for different reasons. Bird for his back and Magic because he was on his back. And I guess MJ just being assumed to be the best college player ever when he clearly isn't has just got my brain thinking about player legacies and whatever the hell else. So yeah, that's it. Kareem should have won. MJ definitely should not have.